Welcome to Rotunda in the West, Conversations with Australian Writers. Without further ado, can I welcome to the stage the author of this wonderful book, The Postie and the Priest, Roland Ron Burrows. We're very proud of him. He's a PWE student, but to his credit, the book was written well before them. Could you please welcome a lovely man, a great conversationalist, great heart, and it's a great book. Could you please welcome Ron Burrows?
Lovely. You've never been called that before, have you?
Thank you, Bruno.
So you'd come for a rap.
I have come for a rap. I'll get in first.
A great man and a great what?
Yeah, you laid it on a bit. Great.
It's thick.
Conversationalist.
Well, it's Footscray. I mean, I suppose you can get away with it.
You get away with anything.
Anyway, listen, we're supposed to be on time here.
Okay.
Right. So what do you want to say?
Oh.
You got the other book there, Frank.
What did I do with that sheet of paper?
So the devil.
The devil's got it. Did I put it?
Is it there? Is it there? What? It's under the chair.
Under the chair?
There, beside you.
Ah!
God's sake.
This is a bit from the other book, the first book. This is called Creepy Catholics and Post Office Fleas. After leaning the bike against the fence, I take the registered mail out of the bag and walk up to the front veranda. Father Bob, with his dog Frank at his heels, opens the security door for me and I follow him into his study. The dog settles himself in his chair and, like a chairman opening a meeting, looks expectantly at me. "Are you going to follow Eggs Benedict's line and conduct the Mass in Latin from now on?" I ask. Frank doesn't answer. "Nah," says Bob, "you don't have to. It's optional." I should get you to read this bit.
Ah, go on.
"You can put it on in addition for 4 or 5 creepy Catholics. This place is infested with creepy Catholics. You don't know they are there. They're a bit like fleas."
Creaky or creepy?
Eh?
Creaky or creepy?
Creepy.
Oh,
Well, they probably creak around while
Go on.
They're a bit like fleas in that you forget about them until they bite. All institutions have fleas. Your institution round the corner, the post office, has its fleas. They are irritating and can be fatally so if allowed to get control. Who are these creepy Catholics? I suppose creepy in the sense that they give me the creeps. They don't necessarily give anyone else the creeps. I should put in throw in a few he says, I says here, because that was Bob. "What do you mean?" I say. "You might get into church and find 2 or 3 Roman Catholics kneeling in the pews, and you might say, 'That's very impressive.' But I'd be saying to myself, 'Have they nothing else to do?' Not because they are kneeling in prayerful posture, but because I've seen them and I know exactly what they have left behind at home." Father takes off his glasses and massages his eyes. "To know all is probably one of the saddest jobs of the parish priest," he says. "You know lots of things. I don't know that much now, but we used to know because we were knocking on doors and going out into people's houses. That was considered to be the great sign of effective parish priesthood. You knew people. Then Vatican II said, 'Hey, why don't you get the parishioners to look after one another? They can knock on each other's bloody doors and keep tabs on each other much better than you can.' Apart from that," adds Father, "people won't be unnerved if they go to the door, and lo and behold, the bloody parish priest is standing there and the woman has to yell out to her husband in the kitchen to put his stubby away because the aristocrat has come to visit. Or he might have joined in the drinking. Post-Vatican II, they said, 'Why don't you go out and become part of the neighbourhood?' So a few of the boys did that, and I suppose some of them went too far. Hence the series Father Ted, drunk and disorderly most of his life. He was not nearly so chatty and sociable as the Vicar of Dibley, the Anglican equivalent. So that's a lot to say in one hit, and you just sat there and said all that while I sat there half asleep."
Exactly. Beautiful. But it ended up on paper.
2 different outlooks on religion, I say, both probably written by a bloody Protestant. "Yes," Bob laughs, "the drunken Irish priest and the sober, or socially drinking only, woman priest in the Anglican Church." Bob drops that subject as if he's just been bitten by one of the post office fleas and starts scratching at another itch. "You're going to come up against the barrier with this biography. There's no story in my life to tell. It's like blogging. style of thing. So that's about it for me.
The comic. Good on you, mate. He's done good, eh?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron.
Postie and the priest.
Yep. And he was bitten by the dog. Wasn't he? That was the first meeting he had with my...
He said you were going to tell that story and he was hoping you would.
Well, I have to because, I mean, he's here.
Welcome,
We survived
Father.
the bite, you see. Sorry.
I'm Bruno, Father. How are you doing?
You're in charge.
I am in charge.
Right.
And you've got to answer my questions,
Yes.
okay?
Yes.
You promised to do that?
I was not there that night. To start, let's get it clear. I did not have...
Father, have a look at that banner over your left shoulder and it says
Jesus.
Rotunda in the West,
What's that?
Conversations with
Oh, sorry.
Australian Writers.
Yes.
And you're not a writer,
I'm not a writer.
and I'm not a writer either.
No,
So
well,
we're frauds, aren't we?
frauds,
I don't know what we're doing here.
What are we doing here? That's what
I
the
was-
cleaner said on the way in. I said, I'm picking up the rubbish. Just jump straight in.
I actually cleaned a bit of rubbish as I came in because I wanted the place to be in pristine condition.
Beautiful. It's a lovely joint, this, isn't it?
Father, you know, I went to St. Peter and Paul's Church in primary
and
school.
survived.
And I did survive. And I'm a South Melbourne supporter.
Yes, and survived.
And you allowed me to use your church for my wedding because I said I'd like to get married at twilight and none of the other churches would allow that. And you said, it's your church, you can do anything you like.
Yeah.
And I haven't been to confession for 25
all right,
years,
my
and I'm
son.
sorry about that.
There you are. That'll last till midnight. Go and sin no more.
Father, I want to start with a really big existential question because I'm told that an interview should never start this way.
Yeah.
Where are you living these days?
I live at number 90. What are you? Inspector Lettieri or something?
Well, I was actually thinking about the fact that you're a priest without his church anymore, and maybe you'd be missing that a bit.
I'm now the priest at large. And there's a parish without borders. And 91 Victoria Avenue, Albert Park, which is down the road on the number 1 tram on the way to the beach, up not far from where...
and the beach hotel is at the end of the street.
40 years in the other joint, Peter's and Paul's Church.
The serious bit of that question, Father, is you must miss not having your church.
Yeah.
How does that play out in the life of a man in his late 70s?
Well, I'm buggered if I know. I mean, it's up to this, what the audience is for. They can see the results. See? They can see the results. I mean, I suppose, how does it play out? Well, I mean, given my feral background, you have to change. You have to be a metamorph. You have to be transformed. You have to change every time there's a change. The only problem...
But we're not expected to do that at that age necessarily.
Well, you lot aren't, but I mean, but I mean, I have to because that's the name of the game. See?
And does it come at a cost? Does it?
Have a look. Can't even bloody walk for God's sake. You know what I mean? So it comes at a cost. Have you lost your wits? That's up to them to vote. They vote, don't they? Do you vote at the end of the night whether he's mad or whether you know what I mean? So it's up to them. But I mean, look.
But you were in that church for about 39 years.
Yeah, 38 years.
Yeah, you came as...
Half my life I was in that place. I came from the army where what was the Vietnam War, at the end of the war.
It was.
73, and there was no further need for so many chaplains.
And you arrived in South Melbourne about 73. And you were
September.
39 years of age. Is that right? Around
39 years of age.
Yeah.
Same month. The first month I arrived, I got the shock of my life because we were used to gunshots in the army, but in fact I think within the first month the painter and docker secretary, Pat Shannon, was shot to death
in the hotel in
the
Cecil
Druids
Street or
Hotel
something.
in Bank Street.
Bank Street.
In Park Street. And that was more or less, that pattern continued because we ended up, I think, burying 3 painter and docker secretaries from the place. And eventually, I think we buried Victor Pearce, also from the place, which elicited, or somebody, I don't know what book it's in, but somebody said to me, why are you burying this mongrel? And I said, because he's dead. You know, I mean... Constitution.
Which, I hope you'll bury me when I'm dead
It's
too,
112
Father.
item in the Australian Constitution is that citizens are entitled to practice their religion.
Yeah. Can we just backtrack a bit, Father? Because I'm trying to get a sense. You arrive at a parish like South Melbourne. You've been on doing little bit parts in a lot of parishes. You'd been to Belgrave. You'd been
there was all over the place. Breakfast.
But you arrived in this church, and there's this beautiful basalt church, and you were a bit smitten by the church, weren't you? And there was a bit of...
Yeah, the first night I went in was Saturday. I remember 14 September 73 was my birthday, actually. And I looked at the joint and I said, Mother of God, I said, I think you've arrived, comrade. Because she's a glorious church. Tricky, I'll tell you.
I know it well.
A glorious church. And it's got a big, what they call, I think, in the trade, rose window, I think. It's not coloured because they were too poor.
And you got the St. Peter and Paul saints on the back.
Well, you got all kinds of... I mean, it was just to me, this was beyond my capability of... Because I'd never been mixing in that kind of big... 1854, I think, Catholicism started in South Melbourne, which, as you know, being history students, 1854, Eureka. So over the 40 years, I've been like Madame Lafarge in the Tale of Two Cities. I've been knitting this bloody scarf, with 1854, and before that was the Aboriginal original owners. You've got to knit that in first. Then you've got to knit in the original settlers, who stopped in Port Melbourne and South Melbourne before they went over the river to magnificent Melbourne. And then you ended up having to knit into this thing. You had to knit in the working class, because South Melbourne, Port Melbourne were the old working class.
And the high rises were going up at this time?
No, they weren't.
They weren't.
They did go up because the developers had moved in and done a bit of social engineering and pulled all the bloody workmen's cottages down because they weren't nice. And they wanted to put Kingsway in, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because it was our Hannah Street.
Yeah.
Hannah Street and trams and thing. But with the social developers, it's on all the time. Footscray and all these places have been, You're hanging on, aren't you, in Footscray? Because I see you've got the original buildings there, still.
Let's stick with South Melbourne for the time being. We'll get to Footscray in a minute.
But it's the same kind of thing, see, because it's working class. That's what I hung around South Melbourne for, because, in fact, I learned...
Did you feel at home in that?
I felt like a student. It's like coming here, see. I mean, you come here to learn something. If you stay here long enough, you'll teach something. That's supposed to be the contract, as far as I understand it. But I went there, you see.
But you were keen to get things done, weren't you? You'd come out of the seminary, you'd gone through Vatican II, and you really welcomed the kind of changes that was going to bring. And you had your own parish, and you were ready to kind of...
Well, you wanted to establish and install what I didn't think much at the stage, because already you got Batshana shot dead. You discover that most of the teenagers in the place are already under the influence of drugs.
Okay.
And not just smoking drugs.
Sure.
Real fair dinkum, knock you down drugs.
So what does a young priest know about those
Well,
kinds of
nothing,
things?
because I only came from the army,
Sure.
for God's sake. We only knew about shooting guns and things. We didn't know that our main enemy was, in fact, at home.
But you had prepared people to go to war, and that's
but
pretty
that's all
serious
right, but you
business,
can't
isn't
prepare.
it?
Look, you try to prepare these days, for God's sake, the Aussies,
Yeah.
who are in a comatose state, gradually being lured into some kind of coma by politicians, because God knows, I mean, every time they open their mouth, they're almost emitting an anaesthetic. I think those, as they say, those who the gods would destroy, they first make mad. Well, that's what they're doing to us. We're all gone stark, raving, bloody mad. And we've got 3 more goddamn months of it.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Can we get onto that a little bit later? I'd love to get back to that theme.
Comrade. It's up to you.
I'm your comrade. I'm not even a member of the Communist Party.
You don't have to be,
I don't have to be.
You don't have to be.
Father, give us a sense of... Because reading the book, I got a sense of you were really ready to kind of roll your sleeves up. You got into this parish and you said, this parish is going to kind of have a mission, didn't it? And it was a mission...
Well, it had a mission for 100 years and it was robbed of it by the developers. So there she is, she's knocked out.
Yep.
And the developers, in their wisdom, decided to put up, what was it, 30... How much... Slavko, you lived in the bloody flats. How high was that block of flats? 30. 30 only? Block of flats, you see. That'll be the pièce de résistance, said the developers, and everybody will live happily ever after in this joint. So they did that. Now, by the time I got there, which is not long, 10 years, 12 years later, the effect of having done all that is already showing itself, you see, because you had a town with no soul, you see.
And you sensed that immediately,
Oh, yes.
did you?
Oh, yes.
So what was your response to that?
If you go into a huge church the size of, a huge church, and when Saturday night you're waiting for people to come and fill the thing up and there's only 20 there, there's something wrong.
That must have been demoralising.
I mean, Catholicism hadn't gone off like a bottle of stale milk then.
Sure.
She was still kind of, smelling of roses.
Okay.
Those days, because we'd all fallen in love with one another, and there was nobody accusing us of sexual abuse of children, and I think we believed that you would find God more in the world than you would in the church, and we were all wearing that on our sleeve, and Catholicism had a bit of mojo. You see what I mean?
But you miss that mojo now, don't you?
Oh, she's gone now for the time being, she's been parked in a garage somewhere.
So she's coming back, is
she'll
she?
get out all right, she'll get out.
What are the signs that she'll get out again?
Well, the fact that there's enough people, as far as I know, what would you call card-carrying Catholics around the traps who don't go to church anymore, but in fact who are still Catholic at heart. Oh, that's the Archbishop's name.
Yeah.
No. See what I mean? See how loyal we are, isn't it? Drop the Archbishop's
Father,
name.
in the book, they talk about you say there's a Catholic ethos.
There's an ethos, there's
not
thing.
doctrine, and ethos drives it. Tell us about ethos and
the clerics
doctrine.
love doctrine. They've got to have doctrine.
But you're a cleric too, aren't you?
Well, yes, I know, but I mean, I'm a reconstructed cleric. But I mean, if I stay in the organisation as a priest, you've got to be a cleric, believe it or not. The cleric being the simple misuse of an English word, which is clerk. In other words, you're supposed to do the paperwork of the Roman Empire. That's how we started off in 380 or something. I think, what's the bloke who used to run the empire? It's only yesterday, for God's sake, Constantine. Constantine was trying to run this bloody mess of a Roman Empire, and he was having a terrible time of it. And he said, who am I going to get to do the bloody paperwork? Because there's Goths and everybody's coming in here and I can't manage it. And somebody says, excuse me, yes. They say there's a mob down the street in the ghetto they can read and write, because that's all they've had to do for 300 years, is reading and writing. They haven't got, they don't involve in sexual promiscuity, therefore they haven't got diseases, because they can't get out the ghetto for a start. And they also avoided, apparently, according to the historians, they avoided the massive devastating effects of the plagues, because they were living healthy lives, so to speak. So this bloke said that they're down there, and only the use they have is we chuck them for the lions every bloody Saturday. You know what I mean? In the Colosseum. But I reckon, says the bloke, that if you go to make them an offer, which he did, Constantine made the offer to the ghetto Christians, and they had to make up their minds. See, if we sign the paper and we do his bureaucratic work for the whole empire, well, then he won't chuck Auntie to the lions and tigers on Saturdays.
So you shunned that notion of a cleric.
Well, they had to accept the contract for the sake of saving their.
But you, Father,
it's 380.
We won't have time to get through my whole interview.
Yeah, I'm going to get there. Only going to take a minute.
We've only got 50 minutes.
But you see, I'm saying that, in fact, to get from the stage of an acceptable... It's the same with all bureaucracies and all institutions. Somewhere along the line, the institutions, which are fine, we have to have them, and the bureaucracies, you see, are fine and we have to have them. But in fact, they've always got to be reforming themselves all the time. This is where the 99% come in, and Occupy Melbourne, and Occupy Footscray, and Occupy Catholicism come in, is the 99% who have to occupy the institution. Otherwise, the institution is almost, I'd say, by nature, cannibalistic. Can't help itself. That's what the army, I think, is up for it, isn't it? The army's up, or the Defence Forces is trying to reform itself because it's gone off. You see what I mean? And the Americans will be put through it too with their surveillance agencies because they've gone off. They think they rule the universe.
And the Catholic Church has gone off
Catholic Church
too.
has gone off. No question about that. And
That must be a source of deep anguish, though,
it
doesn't
is,
it?
but I mean, that's c'est la vie.
But you
That's
grew up with the
life.
hopes of the kind of Vatican II, and you came in and your parish was up and about, and you had this partnership with your lay community,
Yeah.
and you wanted
It was
to set up
working
a
good.
kind of a we society, wasn't
Yeah,
it?
it was.
You believed in
was
all those
working
things,
good.
and you made that imprint on that
Yeah.
on that
Yeah,
parish,
but I mean,
didn't you?
well, we achieved what I considered to be almost nirvana for the Catholics, and that is you've got the
Why can't it
the neighbourhood
persist?
fell in love with the parish, which
But
is
you
about
had to
as far
cajole
as
them
you
a
can
bit
go.
too, Father, didn't you?
I'm only
They-
the conductor of the bloody orchestra.
Because they weren't keen on some of the
You know what I
ideas
mean?
you had when you first arrived.
Eh?
They weren't so keen on some of the ideas when you
Oh
first
no,
arrived.
because they were working class, blue collar people, and they're 200. I mean, the other class that moved in, which is the aspirational class, they're the ones who come in with the flash ideas, and the one that Nick Cater writes his book about, isn't it? About the lucky culture. He says there's a new elite has arisen, and the new elite hasn't got all that much patience with the underachievers. That's what he says. He might be wrong. But that's what that town is an extraordinary mixture of the aspirational class and the working class, and the other class, of course, which has been developing over the last 50 years, which is the underclass itself, the underbelly, I suppose you'd call it. With those who have been deprived of, prevented from access to education.
And you chose to say, we're going to invest our energy in
indeed.
that, aren't you?
Well,
The
that's-
down and outers, the marginalised, the alienated.
Well,
didn't you?
Gina invests in
Sure. Sure.
the coal, natural resource,
And you
we
invested-
invested in. It was our privilege and pleasure to invest in a neighbourhood. I mean, there's nothing more, I would say, what's the word, gloriously ordinary than a neighbourhood.
It is.
And you can see
say that a
people
lot,
all
don't
over
you?
the places pulling bloody neighbourhoods to pieces. Once you pull a neighbourhood, and the Aboriginal people, did we pay our respects? Tonight we should have
No,
paid our respects
that was my fault, sorry.
to the Aboriginal, because they know that you've got to have meaning, you see, and also their spirituality may well be the come and save us religionists, because their spirituality is free range and it's cosmic, it's galactic, you know what I mean? So that's what I'm on about, and that's what Catholicism was on about for 30, 40 years, and then the counter-revolution came along.
And the chances are, Father, that you mightn't live long enough to see that resurgence again.
No,
Is that-
but you've got to personify and personalise it. If you've got to
Do
do it,
you?
it's no good me whinging and moaning about, all the others have gone on. No, I've got to do it myself. That's why I stayed out of the retirement place. And I encourage all older people to stay out. Even if you can't scratch yourself, you can still think. You know what I mean?
And then you say, I'm going to create this pop-up church. Is this an extension of your pop-up church too?
I'd be arrogant to say this is part
No,
of the
I
church
didn't
without
mean-
borders, you know
No.
what I mean? But I mean, you'd say...
But you take your message wherever there's an audience
Well, I
that
got a
wants to
simple
listen.
formula, and that is wherever
that?
good is, there God is. It's simple. And you find it all over the place, all over the place. That's why I'm annoyed with the press just now, because they're constantly picking at us at our weakest spots, like the Islanders playing up in Dandenong, or the Sudanese playing up in Kensington. I mean, for God's sake, that's pornography to write about that stuff. It's pornographic.
Why is
Social
that?
pornography.
Why is that?
Because there's something else going on that should in fact be tackled, and it's too hard for the Aussies.
And what is
because
that?
we're lazy.
What's that, Father?
We've got to build community, not be satisfied with society. We've got to build community. To have community, you've got to have cooperation. And guess what, folks? And we've got to have communication, you see. And you need people whisperers all over the place. Every institution needs people whisperers. You see, did you see the movie The Horse Whisperer? See, the bloody horse is knocked about and frightened and terrified and angry and everything else, and nobody could get the horse to settle down, except that horse whisperer bloke who's learned that in fact you're not going to break this horse, because this horse is too hurt. That's the same with all our teenagers in our society. They're that bloody hurt that they're frightened. And
So we know
terrify them more by telling them that not only are they hurt, but we're going to hurt them more.
was like great, and you sell it, but that's the sort of. I mean, I sold a warehouse that a lot of Sarah's stuff was in, like work things, and I thought, holy Christ! And
I can imagine there would have been a lot of.
Some of it went to